Hello, my twisted friends. My name is Shannon Page, and I would like to welcome you to Tuesday's Twisted Tales. Now, if you are interested and intrigued by true crime like I am, well, I would recommend hitting that like and subscribe button to join me on Tuesdays for another Twisted Tale. I am super excited to be here with you guys today. This has been in the making for a really, really long time. Like, if you know me, you know that for sure. Now, I know that you have heard the John Wayne Gacy story over and over and over again. I mean, we all have. It's been told so many times. But the ending to this one is going to be the story that you haven't heard. So if you know the Gacy story, you know, about the murders and all that, because that is sadly very, very true, unfortunately. Except for finding bodies in the walls and dismemberment, that is false. That is not true. But other than that, if you know the story, then feel free to skip to the last, 30 minutes or so of the video to learn what I learned about the case. Not the murders, but the case. And how we actually caught Gacy. Because it's different than what you know. And if that's the case and you want to do that, my feelings are not going to be hurt at all. Because I would rather you have the truth than be worrying about viewing hours or whatever the heck it's called here. So that being said, let's get into it. So John Wayne Gacy was born March 17th, 1942 to his father John Stanley Gacy and his mother Marion Elaine Robinson in Chicago, Illinois. Now he is the middle child of three and the only son. Now John, his father, he was born June 20th, 1900, so way back in the day. Now, he was a machinist and a World War I veteran. He was a very serious man, and he was pretty incapable of showing emotions like kindness or sorrow. Just kind of flat, this guy. But he could do anything with his hands. He would make repairs around the house, paint, and if he didn't have the proper tool for a job, he would simply make one. He was that guy. Now, he's by all accounts to be considered a perfectionist, and he expected the same perfection from his wife and children. He was quick-tempered and could explode with little to no warning. He was also a heavy drinker, and he'd oftentimes beat his wife and children while drunk. Now, he just really had a problem with his son, so he would never, ever miss an opportunity to let his son know what a disappointment he was to him. He would call Gacy names like dumb, stupid, faggot, and even once told him, quote, "You will likely grow up queer," end quote. I mean, can you even imagine your dad talking to you that way? I can't imagine my dad saying those kind of things to me or my siblings. It just, not good. We're not off to a super great start here. But John, he also would disappear down to his basement, have a drink, listen to some classical music, and it sounds pretty normal, like go down to your basement, enjoy a drink, wind down from a hard day at work. Normal. But he wasn't drinking to unwind, he was drinking to get drunk. And while he was down there, the family, they'd be upstairs waiting on him to come up to have dinner or something, and they'd hear him talking through the vents and answering himself in a different voice. It kind of sounds like Dad had some issues too, okay? Now, of course, the family, they are not going to ask him any questions about this because they all lived in fear of John. John, he was also extremely homophobic, and he would often express his hatred towards, quote, queers, end quote. Now, Gacy's mom, Marion, she was the total opposite of her husband. She was a pharmacist before marriage, and she supported herself quite well with that. But after marriage, she just became a homemaker, a wife and a mom taking care of the house and the kids. She was considered to be a kind and caring woman that loved her children very much. She enjoyed cutting up with her friends and sharing a drink with them from time to time. She also loved to sing and dance, and she found herself oftentimes, though, trying to shield her young son from his father's wrath, okay? So this situation kind of reminds me of that whole opposites attract thing. She's kind and loving, and he is mean and hateful. Well, Gacy, he was nothing like the rough and tough John Wayne, the actor, which is what John wanted for a son. Now, Gacy, he was overweight all his life, sickly, clumsy, not at all athletic. He enjoyed things like cooking and baking with his mom, decorating cookies, helping in the garden. Total opposite of what John wanted and probably needed in a son. So to make Gacy into the man that he wanted, John would beat him severely from a very young age on, okay? Now when Gacy was just 4, he was out in the garage with his dad, and his dad's working on a car or something out there. He has all of these specific car components laid out in a very particular order. Well, the young Gacy, he touched or moved the car parts around, and John, he lost his mind, literally, and just beat the hell out of the 4-year-old so severely. I mean, just snatched up a belt and just started wailing on this kid. Now, on another occasion, John began beating the young Gacy with a broom. Yeah, he had this broom. He's beating him over the head, and he hits him so damn hard with this broom handle that it breaks. Yeah, knocked him out cold. So that would be the first time that the young Gacy would suffer from a traumatic head injury, okay? And another incident he had was on a playground. And so back in the day, the swing sets, they had wooden seats, not that fancy rubbery stuff that we have today. So Gacy, he's out playing on the playground, and one of these wooden seats from the swing set comes back and hits him square in the forehead, again knocking him out cold. And another report for traumatic head injuries was, he was around like 11 or so, and fell down a flight of stairs, and that head injury would land him in the hospital for quite some time. Now, Gacy, he was put on some real heavy, serious, addictive medications at a really young age, and this was to help combat these blackouts and seizures, as well as something else to help dissolve the blood clot that was on his brain. Yeah, we are not off to a good start, folks. Now, due to Gacy's poor health and frequent blackouts, he would be in and out of the hospital a lot. And his father would say, that he's faking it and he's just doing it to get out of school or to gain attention. I mean, John never considered that there might actually be something wrong with his young son, and he damn sure didn't think that breaking a broom handle over his head would cause any damage. I mean, he's not looking good for Father of the Year award, okay? He's not looking good for that. Now, around the age of 7, Gacy and a friend, they are caught fondling a little girl, okay? So his very first sexual experience is with a young girl. Well, his father was told about this, and again, he beats the hell out of the young Gacy. So, I imagine that it was something along the lines of, you show me yours and I'll show you mine kind of thing. Just curiosity amongst young kids. I mean, they're quite young. I obviously was not there and don't know the details, but from what I'm able to read on the matter, it sounds like it was just a curiosity thing amongst a boy and a girl. Now, around the same time, though, Gacy is also being abused by a family friend and local contractor. Now, this guy, he would, take Gacy to the movies or out for ice cream or just rides in his truck. And all the while, he is abusing the young Gacy in a sexual manner. Gacy would later say that it seemed like every time they went out that his head would end up between this guy's legs. So, yeah, that's definitely not good. And he's a very young boy. Well, he's not going to tell, and he sure as hell isn't going to tell his dad, because if things went south super fast with the girl situation, he couldn't even imagine what it would be like with a full-grown man. So he doesn't tell. But he does ask his parents, not to make him go with this guy anymore, and they don't. But they also don't, press the matter. I mean, I think I would ask my kids some questions. Is everything okay? What's going on? Something. And they don't. But they don't make him go either, so I guess that's good. But, well, time goes on, and Gacy, well, he does not graduate from high school, but he does find work at the age of 18, and he got involved with politics. And so he's working as an assistant precinct captain for the Democratic Party. Now, his father, still not impressed, he would end up calling Gacy a, quote, patsy, end quote, for this. But John, he would help buy him a car, And Gacy, of course, does have to pay back every cent, and he's working, so he's making his payments. And Gacy is now not a little kid anymore either. So Johnny has to find other ways to control his son. So like whenever Gacy doesn't fall in line, John needs to be able to have some kind of control over him. So he uses the car for this. And if Gacy falls out of line, well then John, he takes the keys to the car. Now, he's not even considering that if Gacy can't get to work, that he can't make the damn payments, right? Well, Gacy, he gets tired of this, so he gets another set of keys made. And it takes a few times for John to figure out what Gacy has done. And to be quite honest, it's a move I probably would have made too, like I'm making the payments, I've got a job, I need to get there, like, leave me alone and let me do my thing. But, yeah, John, not so much. So moving forward, he would remove the distributor cap, enabling the vehicle. And Gacy, you have to remember, is not at all mechanically inclined. He does not do anything with cars. So he can't just put the cap back on. Now, on one of these particular occasions, it took John about 3 days to put that cap back on the car. And when he did, Gacy took off for Sin City. Yep, we're headed to Vegas, baby. Now, while there, Gacy, he does get a job with an ambulance company, but he wasn't quite 21 years old just yet. So apparently you have to be 21 to drive an ambulance. And so they transfer him to work at the Palm Mortuary there in Vegas. Now, Gacy, he would actually end up living in the mortuary, sleeping on a cot behind the embalming room. Yeah, I don't know, guys. I don't think that I could sleep in a morgue. Not for me. But Gacy, he was okay with this. And he stayed there for about 3 months. Until he freaked himself out, he says. So here's what happens. Gacy, being alone in the building with these bodies, he has the time and opportunity to kind of explore a little bit. I think he's trying to figure out really what his sexuality is, but I have to believe that he knew he was attracted to males more than females. So this body is brought in, and it's of a young teenage boy, and he gets a little crazy this night, and he climbs into the casket. He begins embracing and caressing the body. Now, I was able to find a couple of reports from the morticians that had noticed that the buttons on the shirts were missed, or that maybe the zipper on the trousers wasn't up all the way. So, it really is unclear if Gacy was fired or quit. But either way, he calls his mom and he's like, hey, do you think Dad would allow me to move back home? Well, his dad agrees, and so Gacy returns to Chicago. Now, Gacy, he attends Northwestern Business School, and he graduates from that in 1963. He takes a management trainee position at the Nunn-Bush Shoe Company, and in 1964 he transfers to Springfield, Illinois to work as a salesman. And from there he is promoted to manager. So he's pretty smart when it comes to sales. He could probably sell you an ice cube in Alaska, where I can't sell you a shoe if you're barefoot in the desert. Sales is not my thing, but this dude is pretty good at it. So in March of 64, he meets Marlon Myers. Now, she's a woman that works in his department. And while courting Marlon, Gacy becomes involved in the local Jacys there. And they are kind of like a chamber of commerce. They do things for the community as well as a lot of political things. So it's a great way for young men to get involved with their community and learn politics. Now, it's been said that Gacy worked tirelessly for the organization, and he was named key man in April of 64. Now, Gacy also says that in 64 is when he would have his second homosexual experience. Now, he says that a fellow JC invited him to stay at the house. This guy apparently gets Gacy drunk and performs oral sex on him. I don't think it would have mattered if Gacy was drunk or sober, because if it were a problem, he probably would have just dropped out of the JCs, you'd think. But he doesn't, so, yeah. Now, in 65, Gacy has risen to vice president of the Springfield JCs chapter, and he was also named third most outstanding JC in the entire state of Illinois. Now, Gacy and Marlon, they would get married in September of 64 after just a 9-month courtship. Now, Marlon's father, Fred, he owns 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. And he asked Gacy to move to Iowa and manage these 3 restaurants. So Gacy and his new bride, they pack it up and move to Iowa. Gacy's making $15,000 a year plus a share of the profits, and that's a lot of money. I mean, it's equal to like $200,000 in today's money plus a share of the profits. So he's doing pretty damn good at this point. So things are looking up for Gacy. Now, he of course is going to quickly search out the Iowa Jaycees chapter, and he joins that chapter very quickly in Waterloo. They consider him to be a hard worker and a very ambitious guy, right? But he is something of a bragger, they say. And in 1967, he is named Outstanding Vice President with the organization. Now, he would also serve on the board of directors for the Waterloo chapter. So, I mean, he's pretty settled in life at this point, right? He has a wife, he has a great job, he's making really good money, lots of friends, he's popular and well respected, and so he and Marlon, they decide that maybe it's time to start adding to their family. And in February of 1966, the couple, they welcome their son, their first child, Michael. And that's followed by the couple's daughter, Christine, in March of 67. Now, the year that Michael is born, Gacy's parents, they travel to meet their grandson. And while there, John says to Gacy the words that he has longed to hear his entire life. And he says, quote, "Son, I was wrong about you," end quote. So Gacy, he'd finally earned his father's respect. That's the one thing that this guy has always strived to achieve. Okay? His father's love and respect. Very high on the list. Number 1, his whole life. So now Gacy's on top of the world. Like, he literally has everything. He has a great job. He has a family. He has friends. And above all, he has the respect of his father. But good things, they don't last long. Well, not with Gacy anyway. You see, in Waterloo, the Jaycees, they run things a little differently than that in Chicago. Yeah. In Waterloo, they swap wives. They watch pornography or stag films, as they were called. And, of course, there's drugs and alcohol. Now, all of this, of course, is right up Gacy's alley. I don't think that any of it bothered him at all. He's okay with all of it. But it's about this time that Gacy is going to open up what he calls the club. And it's just a little tiki bar there in his basement with a pool table. And though Gacy did employ both genders at the restaurant, he would only invite the boys over to the club. So when these young boys would go over, he would get the kids kind of tipsy with some booze or a little bit of weed, maybe both. And then he would make sexual advances towards them. Now, if they didn't go for this sort of thing, he would just say that he's conducting scientific studies. It's just tests on homosexuality. He's just testing their morals. Now, he said that if they did participate in these experiments, that they would receive $50. And you got to remember that is a lot of money back then, and a lot of these kids probably had never even held a $50 bill. So some of them actually would go along with these experiments, while others didn't. I'm pretty sure he even had like a certificate or a plaque or something on the wall that said something along the lines of him being commissioned to do these homosexuality tests. Like, different times, people, I know. Now, in August of 67, Gacy, he will commit his first known assault. Now, this young boy, he is the son of a fellow Jaycee. Now, Gacy, he brings the young boy, Don Voorhees, back to his house to watch some stag films. And Gacy tells this kid, you can't have sex with a woman until you've had sex with a man. What the fuck? Yeah. Now, the boy, he trusts Gacy, right? I mean, he is a friend of his father's, and he wouldn't lie to him, would he? Well, of course he would. It's freaking Gacy, but this kid doesn't know that, right? So Gacy, he gets the kid drunk and he assaults him. Yeah. Now, this is going to go on for several months before Don finally tells his father that, these things are happening to him. He probably had to figure out how in the hell to say it. Took months, Goodness. But there would be several boys that came forward after Don did. Now, some of these kids, they were actually blackmailed into sexual activity with Gacy. And he had the help of his wife, Marlon. Yeah. You see, Marlon, she was into some kinky shit too. So this is how the couple would run the scheme. So the Gacys, they would invite these young boys or a boy to come and stay the night. Gacy would tell the boy that he could have sex with his wife, but if he caught them in the act, the boy would then owe him, Gacy, a blowjob or some other sexual favor. So as these boys would be in the guest room, Marlon, she would, go slithering on in there, climb in bed with the boy, and they'd get it on. And almost on cue, Gacy would appear at the door and catch them. Yeah, catch them in the act. Now call me crazy, but that makes Marlon a damn predator too. The hell, just because she's a woman doesn't make it right. She's screwing around with these teenage boys, so she's no better than her husband. But it also makes me believe that she was 100% aware of the fact that her husband was very much into young boys. Yeah, there's really no way around it, right? Like, what the hell? So, yeah. Now, another time, Karen, Gacy's little sister, she had talked about a time that her and her husband went to visit Gacy and Marlon. And while they were there, Gacy's like, hey, we've got this JC event that we're going to go to. Y'all are coming with us. It's going to be a great time. So they're there with the JCs, and they're enjoying themselves and having a great time. And then all of a sudden, Gacy says, well, don't be surprised if we go home with different people. Talking about him and Marlon. The whole wife swapping thing, that's what he's talking about. So according to Karen, that's exactly what happened. Gacy didn't come home at all that night, and Marlon, well, she brought a different man home. Well, needless to say, it made Karen and her husband very uncomfortable, and so moving forward, when they would go to visits, they would get like a hotel room. They didn't want to be any part of those shenanigans. And anyway, I don't blame them. But yeah, it's funny though that everybody's like, oh, poor Marlon, and all this BS. Like, no, poor Marlon, my ass. She was something else too. Now anyway, back to Don Voorhees. He finally does tell his father. And his father, as you can imagine, is not real happy about the situation. He is losing his mind. He goes straight to the police station. He files the claim against Gacy. The police come and arrest Gacy and charge him with sodomy in March of '68. Now, of course, Gacy, he's going to deny all of this. He says that Don and his father are lying because the boy's father is running against him for the presidential seat with the JCs. It's all political, you see, and none of this happened. Well, Gacy, he asked another KFC employee of his, this guy's name is Russ, to go and beat up poor little Don Voorhees and tell him to drop the charges. And if Russ does this, then Gacy will pay him $300. So Russ does exactly that. He attacks Don, he beats him up, maces him, and tells him not to go through with this Gacy stuff. Well, of course that's going to backfire, right? I mean, when you're screaming not to go through with something related to Gacy, well, you know then that Gacy probably put this kid up to it. So Don, he goes straight to the police and he reports the attack. Russ is quickly found and questioned, and he confesses pretty quickly. And he tells them, that he did beat Don up and that Gacy had asked him to do it. I mean, if you're not guilty, you probably don't need to hire Russ to begin with, right? I mean, what the hell? So now he's got the sodomy charges and these assault charges and hiring this kid to do that. So, yeah, Gacy, what do you do? But he's so arrogant, right? He's so full of himself that he insists on taking a lie detector test to clear his good name. Oh, yeah. Now his request is granted, and as you might guess, he failed it not once, but twice. But he still has a crap ton of support from the other members of the JCs, and him simply asking for the test makes him innocent. There must be something wrong with the test. What the hell is wrong with these people? I mean, for real, they would support him regardless. I mean, even when the truth was staring him in the face, this dude would just be able to talk his way out of anything, really. So they support him. They rally around him. They give him all the support and love that he could possibly ask through this entire ordeal. Well, on May 10th, 1968, Gacy, he was indicted on the sodomy charge and arrested. He was also charged in relation to hiring the Russ kid. And on September 12th, Gacy is ordered to undergo a psychiatric examination, right? They're thinking maybe he's a little off. Well, over the course of 17 days, Gacy would be seen by 2 different doctors. Now, they concluded that Gacy had antisocial personality disorder, which incorporates sociopathy and psychopathy. Good start. That he is unlikely to benefit from any therapy or medical treatment, and that his behavior pattern was likely to bring him in repeated conflict with society. And never was a truer statement made. I mean, seriously, what the hell? But he is mentally competent to stand trial. Now, I was able to get one of the doctor's reports on his findings where Gacy was concerned, and this is how it reads. Quote, "The most striking aspect of the test result is the patient's total denial of responsibility for everything that had happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He presents himself as a victim of circumstance and blames other people who are out to get him. The patient attempts to assure a sympathetic response by depicting himself as being at the mercy of a hostile environment." End quote. Yeah. Well, in court, his attorneys tell him to plead guilty to the sodomy charges and not guilty on all other charges, which he does. Now, he tells the judge that he and Dawn did engage in sexual relations, but that it was Dawn's fault, you see. He's the one that started it all, and he only participated out of curiosity. Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly how that went. Well, no one believed him, and especially not the judge, and he sentences Gacy to 10 years to be served at the Anamosa State Penitentiary on December 3rd, 1968. Well done, Judge. Well done. Well, Marlon, remember her, Gacy's wife? Yeah. Well, she files for divorce, full custody of the kids, alimony, child support, and all assets. She is granted everything, and the divorce is final in September of 69, and Gacy would never see her or his children ever again. And I don't think he tried. Just throwing that out there. Now, Gacy, he's a real quick study, and everything that he does is very calculated. Nothing he does is by chance or on a whim. So Gacy, he quickly figures out how the prison system works, and in a short time, he becomes first cook. Now, I've never been to prison or jail, but it is my understanding that food is a type of currency in there. So being first cook is going to give him some kind of control or power within the prison, okay? Now, he would make sure that the guards and the warden had the very best pick of everything. I mean, the best bread, the best meat, the best everything. And he would also get the prisoners working in the mess hall with him a raise. He would take the inmate JC's chapter from 50 members to 650 by the time he is released. And he even had a mini golf course brought on the grounds, and he oversaw the entire installation. I mean, what the fuck? Call me crazy, but why in the hell would anyone allow a mini golf course to be brought into a prison yard, for crying out loud? Maybe not all of the inmates in there are violent offenders, but surely a couple of them at least are, and now we've gone off and handed them some damn golf clubs. Yeah, I don't know. But that's Gacy. He can get shit done. He's not a stupid man. In June of 69, Gacy, he would apply for early release. That was denied. But now he knew what he had to do to be ready for the next hearing. So he completes the 16 credits that he needed to earn for his high school diploma, and he continues to be a model prisoner. Now Gacy, he would get the news of his father's passing on Christmas Day of 1969, and I guess the prison didn't tell Gacy for like a couple of days that his father had passed. And so it was reported that Gacy, once he got the news, he literally just collapsed completely. Like he had a hard time breathing. He needed help walking. He was absolutely devastated at the news. And you got to remember, like, he'd waited his whole life to get his father's approval, and he got that, and then he does this stupid shit and ends up in prison, and now his dad's dead. So yeah, I imagine that was pretty traumatizing for him. He does apply for supervised release to attend his father's funeral, but that was also denied. Well, on June 18th, 1970, Gacy would be paroled with 12 months probation after only serving 18 months of a 10-year sentence. Yeah, that's right, folks. A year and a half. And that's a big WTF moment for me. So, this guy commits these horrible acts of sexual violence against a child, and he doesn't even do a quarter of the 10 years he was sentenced to. Like, it quite literally blows my mind every time I say it out loud, and it makes me want to throw up. So he did have a couple of conditions to his release, and that was that he had to move back to Chicago with his mother, and that he had a 10 p.m. curfew, with the Iowa Board of Parole receiving regular updates on his progress. Sure. Yeah. So they're sending him to Chicago and not telling anybody, so who in the hell is supposed to be checking up on this dude, right? Now, you would think that maybe Iowa would have called Chicago and said, hey, we're cutting this guy loose and sending him your way because we sure as hell don't want him, and you might want to keep an eye out on him. But no, they don't do that. So on June 19th, 1970, Gacy, he is back in Chicago. He gets a job as a cook pretty quickly, and he settles right into life as if nothing ever happened. Yeah. But it won't be long before Gacy's urges are no longer kept under control, because on February 12th of 71, Gacy was charged with sexually violating a teenage boy. Now, this boy said that Gacy lured him into the car at a Chicago bus terminal. He took him back to his house and attempted to force him into sex acts. Now, the boy, he didn't show up for court, and the charges were dropped. Like, this guy isn't even out of prison for a damn year yet, guys, and he's already committing these crimes again. So he's on parole, but no one knows. It's obviously a clear violation of his parole, but no one is checking. And to make matters worse, he would be off of parole in October of 71, and his record would be sealed. What the hell? What the hell? Like, listen, I get it. Back in the day, they didn't have all the fancy stuff that we have today with all of the cameras, the DNA, the computers, for God's sakes. They didn't have all that. I get it. But the phones worked, The phones worked. We didn't need Paul Revere running up and down the road delivering news. The phones worked. And Iowa really should have called Chicago to give them a heads up. Like, there's just, what the hell? There's also no known reason why on God's green earth his records were sealed. I mean, that really should have remained in big bold letters at the top of his rap sheet forever, not sealed. And the only time that I know of records being sealed is when you were a minor. But Gacy, he was well into his 20s, so I don't know. Now, I kind of suspect that maybe Gacy had something to do with it himself. He was friendly with the warden, and maybe he had talked to him about his records being sealed. Who knows? But sealed they were. Now, yeah. With his mother's help. I have to catch my breath after that one because it just irritates me. But anyway, with his mother's help, he is able to buy a home. Now, that home would be the 8213 West Somerdale Ave, and this is where it will all go down. Now, up to this point, we are seeing that Gacy is a sexual predator. There is no denying that. But what he becomes is really that of nightmares. Now, I have studied the likes of serial killers since I was 16, and I've written to several of them over the years, and Gacy is the only one that ever gave me nightmares, and he wouldn't have even wanted me for a victim. That is how awful this dude did things. Yeah. So, not good. Bad nightmares. Now, shortly after buying the home on Somerdale Ave, Gacy, he began dating Carol Hoff. Now, they dated a time or two back in high school, and Carol and Karen, Gacy's little sister, they were friends. So they didn't date long before getting married in July of 72. Now, just 1 week before the wedding, though, Gacy, he was arrested for aggravated battery and reckless conduct. And this was in response to a young boy named Jackie D. Now, he said that Gacy lured him to the car pretending to be a police officer. Like, he had a badge and a gun and everything, and he had his car kind of set up to look like a cop car back then, too. And so, once in the car, he forced this kid into oral sex. Now, I know you're thinking, like, oh, we got this dude now, right? No. Jackie, the young boy, didn't show up for court, and all charges are dropped again. And again, he gets away with this shit. And you gotta remember that Gacy, he was real calculated. Nothing he did was ever by chance. He operates this way in everything that he does. So it was extremely important that Gacy looked a certain way, and that way was that he was the greatest guy you would ever meet. Like, it was a privilege to be in his presence, kind of thing, okay? He was friends with everyone, all his neighbors, his community. He would shovel snow or carry in groceries. He would loan out his tools to his neighbors or offer to help them with whatever project they were working on. Like, he would study people of power, and even if he didn't personally know these people, he knew enough to convince you that he knew them. That's really all that mattered. And he did all of this not to actually be friends with anyone. He did it so that if the day ever came that these people were asked about Gacy, that they would have nothing but great things to say about him. And it worked. This allowed him to effectively blend in. You couldn't find a neighbor anywhere that had anything but good things to say about him. Nope. It was just the opposite. They could not say anything bad at all at any time about this guy. And the thing with Gacy is that he wasn't trying to just blend in. He was standing out. He was loud. He was obnoxious. He was in your face. He wasn't quietly blending in. He was boldly standing out. Okay? Now, it's about this time that Gacy quits his cook job and starts his own business, PDM. So PDM Contractors is painting, decorating, and maintenance. PDM initially just did minor repair work, some light concrete work, some sign writing, and redecorating, but it would expand to include interior design, remodeling, installation, and landscaping. And by 1978, when Gacy was arrested, PDM was earning over $200,000 a year. That's well over $1 million in today's money. So the dude was doing pretty damn well. He was just a sociopath. Now in 73, Gacy, he would take one of the PDM employees out to Florida to look at a property that he had purchased out there. And of course, it's Gacy. He's only going to get one hotel room. And in this room, he violently and viciously attacks this young kid. Now, the assault was so bad that this young boy, he actually sleeps on the beach. He's not about to be left in that room with this guy. But he does have to travel back to Chicago with Gacy. Now, once that plane lands back in Chicago, the boy, he gets in his car, he drives to Gacy's house, and he beats the shit out of him on his own front lawn. And good for him. It was Carol's mom that actually broke up that fight. Now, when they asked Gacy, Carol and her mother, when they asked Gacy, why is this young boy so angry and upset with you? Like, what made him do these things? Gacy's like, well, I refused to pay him for the work that he did. He did a shitty job, and I'm not going to pay him, and he's mad. And they believed him. Yeah. The boy, he did not report the crime. So once again, Gacy is not found out, and his ego is just growing bigger. And it's already real big. So there's many times that Gacy should have been caught, and he just wasn't. Either the kids weren't showing up for court, or the crimes were so embarrassing and humiliating that they weren't ever reported. But Gacy, he would also tell these kids it didn't matter if they reported it or not, because no one was going to believe them anyway. And you'll see that as we move through this awful story, that is true. Now in 74, Gacy, he starts hosting these big themed parties at his home. Now guests in the hundreds would show up. Anyone who was anyone was invited. If you had a title or some sort of power, doctor, attorney, mayor, police chief, governor, that sort of thing, yeah, you were definitely invited. And oftentimes these people would show up. Yeah, show up. So it's around this time that Gacy, he takes up politics again, and he's offering the Democratic Party there free labor from PDM, because he's such a good guy, right? He's so helpful, and he just really wants to support the Democratic Party, and whatever they need, you do PDM, and I won't charge you. Yeah. So he would be rewarded for this good deed, and he was appointed to serve on the Norwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee and earned the title of precinct captain. By 75, he was the director of the annual Polish Constitution Day Parade, and he supervised this event from 75 to 78. Now, through this position, he was able to meet many people of power and was even able to meet the First Lady, Rosalind Carter. Yeah, that was on May 6, 1978, just 7 months before his arrest. He was photographed with her wearing his cute little Secret Service button. And again I say, what the hell? This dude got past the damn Secret Service. Like, none of that shit would happen today. Now, to be fair, he hadn't been discovered for the murders yet. But he did do time for sodomy against a minor child. And I'm going to take a guess here and say that once Gacy's crimes were made public, just a few short months later, that someone from the damn Secret Service lost their job. This event would be and still is the Secret Service's most embarrassing moment. Yeah, sure it is. Okay. Gacy. He's always looking for things to do to improve his overall image. Remember, he is calculated. Now, one day, while he was at his local Moose Club, he met someone from the Jolly Joker Clown Club. He asked a few questions and decided to join. Now, he would make his own costumes and design his own makeup. And he had 2 registered clowns under his name. They were Pogo and Patches the Clown. Now, Gacy's clown makeup was not the normal clown makeup, though. Like, it wasn't the normal style that clowns would use. Gacy, he would have real pointed, sharp edges that were more scary than cute, but he didn't seem to care, and it didn't stop him from doing charity work or visits to sick children in the hospital or even doing birthday parties. And I'm pretty sure he had like a small contract with the ice cream place, the 31 flavors or 33 flavors, whatever the hell they were called. Pretty sure he had a contract with them too. So, yeah, didn't stop him. Now, Carol, she is starting to notice that her husband is spending more time away from the home, okay? Like, he would come home in the real early morning hours saying that he had to work through the night. And she also is noticing that when he is around the house, he's in the garage with real young boys. So her curiosity is piqued. And when Gacy is away, and she knows that she can't be, like, busted anytime soon, she decides to take a little stroll out to the garage there. Yeah, she wants to poke around and kind of see what she can see. And so she gets in there, and she sees a mattress, a red light, a lot of wallets and IDs of young boys, stag films, sex toys, magazines, nothing good. Anyhow, she sees Gacy, and she kind of works up the nerve to ask, why do you have all of these IDs? And he aggressively tells her to stay out of the damn garage. It's none of her business. Okay. Yeah, if that was me, and I walk into my husband's garage and I'm seeing all this crazy damn shit all over the place, I'm pretty sure the IDs would have been way low on the totem pole for me to be worried about. Like, what the hell? He's out there with a bunch of young boys, and there's all these sex toys and a freaking mattress and all this bullshit, and you're worried about the IDs? That's me. Carol, she doesn't pursue the matter any further. Yeah, I don't know. We are going to go back, though, to New Year's Day of 1972, and this is just before Gacy and Carol actually get married. Now, Gacy, he was out driving around, and he goes to the bus depot, and he sees a young boy standing out in the cold. So Gacy, he asks the kid, what are you doing? And the kid says, well, my bus doesn't leave for the next, until the next morning, and so I'm just looking for a place to hang out and stay warm until then. And so, Gacy, he says, well, you want to get in? Like, I can take you for a ride, show you the sights. We can go look at some ice sculptures. You'll be warm, that sort of thing. So the kid, he gets in the car. The young boy, Timothy Jack McCoy here. Yeah. The two, they're talking about sex, because sex is always going to come up with Gacy. And according to Gacy, he says that the young boy says, well, it doesn't matter if it's with a boy or a girl. Sex is sex. Yeah. I don't know if there's any truth to that because, it's Gacy. But now, Gacy, he's going to invite this boy to stay at his house, and he tells them, that I'll get you back to the bus depot in the morning to catch your bus. So the young boy agrees. So now, here's Tim. He's at Gacy's house, and according to Gacy, the two have consensual sex. And I kind of believe this story. So, according to Gacy, he said that the following morning, he wakes up to see that Tim is in the room with a knife. So Gacy, he lunges out of bed and the fight is on. And it was one hell of a fight, according to Gacy. Like, it was a real struggle. And Tim is fighting hard and he's saying all kinds of stuff like, wait, stop, what the fuck? He's really like, why is this guy attacking me? Well, during the struggle, Gacy, his arm gets cut. And he does eventually get the knife from Tim and he stabs the young boy a couple of times in the chest, killing him. Now Gacy, he gets up, he goes into the kitchen, and he sees a carton of eggs and bacon laid out, and the table there was set for two. So Gacy says, the kid wasn't trying to kill me, he was trying to wake me up, and he should not have come into the room with a knife. So I kind of believe that story. Anyway, now here's Gacy, he's got blood everywhere, a dead boy on the floor, and Carol, she is due home any minute. So he throws Tim's body into the crawl space, literally just lifted the hatch and threw the body down there. So if anyone had ever opened the hatch, you would see the body. Like, he didn't try to hide it, he just got it out of the way. Now, he had just finished cleaning up the bloody mess when Carol and the girls walked through the door. Now, Gacy, he would later say this, and it is very, very disturbing. He says, quote, "I had the most mind-numbing orgasm I've ever had while killing him, and that is when I knew that death was the ultimate thrill," end quote. Yeah, this motherfucker is doing sex wrong, okay? He's doing it wrong. There's no damn one. No, he's doing it wrong. The fuck? Mind-blowing orgasm. What the shit is wrong with this dude? Yeah, well, Carol, she's starting to smell a funky smell. It's not good, and it's not going away. No matter how much she cleans and no matter what she cleans with, this smell is just not going away. And she tells Gacy, it smells like something died down there. So Gacy, he puts lime down, and this helps a little bit, but not enough to keep Carol from, bitching. So Carol, she and the girls leave one day, and Gacy, he pours concrete over Tim's body. Now Gacy, he wouldn't kill again until 74. Like, he took a little break to focus on his company, PDM. He hired only young teenage boys and maybe an occasional 20-something here and there, but mostly just teenage boys, okay? So in 1975, he hires a young boy by the name of Anthony. Now, Anthony Anatuki. And Anthony, he is 15 years old. He's a high school wrestler, and he's saving money for a car like most teenagers do. While working, Anthony, he stepped on a nail, and he had to go to the hospital to get the tetanus shot. And his injury is going to prevent him from working for a couple of days. So Gacy, he takes the boy to the hospital, gets him the shot, and then takes him back to his house, Now Anthony, he's home alone. His parents, they're out of town for the weekend or something. So Gacy, he ends up at Anthony's door just to, check on him, make sure he's okay, be a good boss, doesn't need anything, right? Yeah. So he even brought a little wine or something. The kid's 15, for crying out loud. Well, Gacy starts messing around with Anthony, saying, you're this big high school wrestler, show me some of your moves. And so, they kind of begin wrestling around a little bit when all of a sudden a handcuff goes on Anthony's left wrist. Now remember, we are in Anthony's house. We are not at Gacy's. So Anthony, he's trying to keep his right wrist from being in those cuffs, but Gacy, he does get them on, and then he simply leaves the room. What the hell? Yeah, the nerve of this dude. Well, young Anthony, he realizes that he can free his right hand, so he does. But he keeps his hands behind his back so that it looks like he's still cuffed. This kid is damn smart. Well, when Gacy enters back into the room there, Anthony, he lunges forward, grabbing both legs, taking Gacy's ass to the ground with what he called a, quote, beautiful double leg takedown, end quote. And I say, hell yeah, you go, Anthony. I love this story. I hate that it happened to Anthony. I do. But I absolutely love how Anthony tells it because he's just so... it's just wow. I love it. So, outstanding job, Anthony, I gotta say. Now, while he has Gacy down, he gets himself out of the cuffs. You know, he finds the key or whatever, and he gets himself out of the cuffs. Well, then he decides to cuff Gacy. I mean, the story just gets better and better. Now, Gacy, he is not very happy about this shit. In fact, he is real pissed off. But he says, quote, "Not only are you the first one to get out of the cuffs, you got them on me," end quote. What the fuck? Like, Anthony, he doesn't even know what the hell this means, right? He just thinks that it's a test because Gacy is always testing these damn kids, and he thought it was a test, and he wanted to win, okay? Gacy, he is very upset about this situation, and he's hooting and hollering about it, and Anthony tells him, you know, "Once you calm down, I will free you, but once I do, you need to leave." So, Anthony, he keeps his word. It takes about 15 minutes. Gacy finally calms down. Anthony frees him, and Gacy leaves. Holy shit is what I gotta say about that. Like, what the hell? So, Anthony, he would continue to work for Gacy for a while. Why, you ask? Well, because he had no idea that he was in danger. He thought that it was a test, okay? He also would say that he, quote, shocked Gacy that day. I'm sure he did. He also says that, you know, he would have been like an earlier victim, and that maybe Gacy hadn't quite perfected his craft just yet. And that's probably true. But either way, Anthony, you, my friend, are a badass, and I absolutely love that you were able to, one, not realize that you were in danger, because that is probably what saved you. And two, that because of your calmness and thinking that you were being tested, that you were able to tell the tale. And so my hat's off to you, my friend. I love you, and I think you're incredible, and I love that you survived this horrific event. So again, hats off to you. Now, 1 week after the attempt on Anthony, another of Gacy's employees would simply disappear. This is John Bukovich. Now, he had argued with Gacy about a couple weeks' worth of pay that he hadn't received, okay? So John and a couple of his buddies, they go to Gacy's house to try to collect his wages. And Gacy tells him that, you know, he'll have it to him soon. It's just an accounting error. He doesn't have it right now, but it's coming, okay? So John and his buddies, they leave. Now, it is thought that Gacy sees John out later that night and asks him to go back to his house to collect the check. Like, he sees John somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, I got that check. If you want to get in, we'll go to my house and get it picked up." That's what's thought to have happened here. So John, he gets in with Gacy, but he is never seen again. Now, his car was later found with his wallet in the seat and the keys in the ignition. John's family, they do file a missing persons report, and they tell the police officers to check with Gacy because they knew their son was going there to collect his check. Now, the police, they do go and they talk to Gacy, and he tells them that John, he was there with a couple of his friends. They all left together, and he hadn't seen him since. He also tells the police that John had mentioned something about wanting to run away. Now, the Bukovich family, though, you know, they would end up calling the police over 100 times. Yes, people, over 100 times, begging them to look further into Gacy. In fact, Mrs. Bukovich, she went to Gacy's house herself, and she questioned him. Now, Carol, she was out of town, so she was of absolutely no help when John disappeared. And she was about to get herself a little shock of her own from Gacy. You see, on Mother's Day of 75, after having sex, Gacy tells Carol, quote, "This is the last time we will ever have sex," end quote. The fuck? Carol, she's like, the hell's going on here? She's not understanding this. And Gacy apparently tells her that he is, quote, bisexual, end quote. Yeah, he is gay. He got that all twisted up. Carol stays a little longer, but quickly realizes that things are not going to improve, and so she does ask for a divorce in October of 75. But she and the girls would stay in the house until she can find, a place for them to live, which she does and ends up moving out in February. So it takes her like 4 months to find a place. And 1 month later, the divorce is final. So Gacy, he's in the house by himself, completely unchecked. Yeah. It's about this time, too, that the neighbors are starting to notice that Gacy is showing erratic behaviors. Like, he's still civic-minded, but something's a little off. Like, he's keeping real late hours, and he's keeping the company of very young boys. He's coming and going at all hours of the night. I mean, things are a little different. So from March of 76 through December of 78, Gacy would go on a murderous rampage. Yeah. He called this time his cruising years. So on April 6, 1976, 18-year-old Daryl Sampson vanishes. 5 weeks later, on May 14th, Randall Raffett just disappears. Hours later, 14-year-old Samuel Stapleton also vanishes. June 3rd of 76, 17-year-old Michael Bonin. He was traveling from Chicago to Waukegan, never to be seen again. 10 days later, on June 13th, 1976, 16-year-old William Carroll, a.k.a. Billy, was never seen alive again, and not long after, another unknown boy would also just disappear. Now, on July 26th of 76, Gacy would hire an 18-year-old boy named David Cram. On August 21st, David moves in with Gacy, and 1 day later, Gacy gets David drunk. It's like his 19th birthday. It's David's 19th birthday. So they're celebrating, getting a little tipsy. And he shows him the handcuff trick. And then starts entertaining as a clown. Like, what the hell? The 19-year-old probably doesn't want to see a damn clown act, but whatever. He gets Cram in the cuffs, and he's kind of thrashing him around while holding the chain links, the little chain links that are there on the cuffs, like the 2 links. So he's thrashing him around the room that way, okay? And he tells Cram that he is going to have his way with him sexually. Whether he likes it or not, this is going to happen. Well, Cram, he served in the army a little bit, at least long enough to learn how to defend himself, okay? And he straight kicks the shit out of Gacy right in the face. And while Gacy is laying there, Cram, he's able to free himself. Now, you would think that Cram might move out, right? No, he stays. And a month later, Gacy shows up at Cram's bedroom door and he says, quote, "Dave, you really don't know who I am. Maybe it would be a good idea to give me what I want," end quote. Yeah, well, Cram, he's able to resist the attack again, and Gacy leaves the room saying, quote, "You're no fun," end quote. What the fuck? Okay, well, now Cram, he has finally had enough and he moves out, but he does continue to work for Gacy at PDM. Not me, man. The first sign of trouble, the fuck, I'm out. I'm leaving. I'm not going to stick around, and I sure as shit I'm not going to keep working for you. I'm done. I'm like the one-time wonder, okay? Yeah, well, after Cram moves out, another young man, 18-year-old Mike Rossi, moves in. And this is going to be like late July or early August of 76. Now, on August 5th, yeah, see those dates there? On August 5th of 76, 16-year-old James Hawkinson vanishes. Now, he spoke to his family on the 5th, never to be heard from again. And on the 6th of August, 17-year-old Rick Johnston, he was on his way to a concert, and he was going to call his mom for a ride when the show was over. The call never came. Now, 2 more unidentified young boys would also disappear in 76. Then we have Kenneth Parker and Michael Moreno. They were friends, and they were last seen together on October 25th, 1976. They were just 16 and 14 years old. They were last seen on Chicago's North Side, and they were reported missing by their parents the following day. Now, 1 day later, on October 26th, 19-year-old William Bundy, a.k.a. Bill, vanishes, and he too would occasionally work for PDM. Now, he told his family he was going to a party but never returned. December 12th of 76, 17-year-old Gregory Godzik simply vanished. He worked a short time for PDM before he came up missing, and he had told his family that Gacy had him digging in the crawl space for a plumbing project or some kind of draining tiles. We now know that he was digging his own grave. I can't even imagine. Dear God. Godzik's car was later found in Niles. His parents and older sister contacted Gacy about Greg's disappearance. In fact, Greg's mom, she went to Gacy's house to confront him. Now, Gacy told her that her son had run away. And when she asked, how do you know that? Gacy said, well, he left me a message on my machine. When she asked to hear the message, of course, Gacy says, oh, I deleted it. This bastard. Ugh, the hell these parents are going through. Now, 1 month later, on January 20th of 77, John Zick, just 19 years old, disappeared. Now, Zick was lured to the house on the pretext of selling his car to Gacy. He was never seen again. Another young man, around 22 to 33 years old, would also disappear in that winter of 77. March 15th of 77, 20-year-old John Prestige, he was in Chicago from Michigan visiting friends before he just vanished. In the spring or summer of 77, another male between 17 and 21 years of age also just disappeared. Now, in March of 77, Gacy was hired as a construction supervisor for a company called PE Systems. Now, they were a firm that specialized in nationwide drugstore remodeling. And with this contract, Gacy would have to travel out of state a lot to oversee some of these projects. So in April of 77, Mike Rossi, he moves out of Gacy's home. Okay, so he has been living with Gacy from July or August of 76 through April of 77. Now, July 5th of 77, another young boy, Matthew Bowen, he's never seen again. In August of 77, a clue, though, would finally emerge concerning John Zick's disappearance. Now, a young man was driving Zick's car, and he stole some gas. Now, when the police run the plates, they come back to Gacy. So the police go and they talk to Gacy, and he says that he bought the car from Zick in February with the explanation that Zick needed the money to run away. The police did nothing further. Yeah. So who was driving the car stealing the gas? Well, that's Mike Rossi. Now, Mike claims that Gacy sold him the car. The police, they do reach out to the Zick family and they tell them, your son is fine. He sold his car to Mr. Gacy and then left town. Like, what the hell? How would they even know that to be fact? It's like Gacy said it and they're like, oh yeah, he's telling us the truth. Holy shit. I don't know who's doing any policing there in Chicago, but it damn sure isn't the police department. Dumbasses. Now, I get it. Again, they didn't have all of the fancy shit that we have today to solve crimes and mysteries and all that. They didn't have the DNA. They didn't have the fancy computers. They didn't have much. I get it. But when one guy's name keeps coming up over and over and over and over again, you would think that someone would start checking the guy out. But they don't. And by the end of 77, 6 more boys would simply vanish. Unbelievable. Now, this next one, it raises some questions, so pay attention to the dates here. Robert Gilroy, 18 years old, is last seen on September 15th, 1977. He was the son of a Chicago police sergeant, and they only lived blocks away from Gacy's home. Now, on September 12th of 77, we know for a fact that Gacy was not in Chicago. He was in Pittsburgh overseeing a PE Systems job, and he did not return until September 16th. Meaning Gacy was not in the Chicago area at all when this young man vanished. Ah, yes. So it might give a little credence to Gacy's claims of having had help. Interesting. Yes. Now, 10 days later, on September 26th, 19-year-old John Mowry vanishes. October 17th, 22-year-old Russell Nelson, he was in Chicago visiting friends and just disappeared from a dance club. 4 weeks later, 16-year-old Robert Wench from Kalamazoo, Michigan, disappeared. November 18th, 20-year-old Tommy Bowling vanishes. 3 weeks later, on December 9th, 1977, 19-year-old David Talsma gone. December 20th of 77, Gacy he picks up 19-year-old Robert Donnelly. Now, Gacy grabbed him at a gunpoint from the Chicago bus terminal. He takes him back to the Summerdale home, and he violently and viciously assaults this young man for hours and hours and hours of torture, including Russian roulette. He would drown Donnelly only to revive him and continue the horrific abuse. This would go on for hours and hours, like hours, not 1 or 2 or 3, like 7, 8, or 9 hours of this shit. Drowned him, bring him back to life, torture him, assault him some more, burn him, pee on him. I mean, he put him through it. And then the Russian roulette thing, so mental on top of all this physical, he's mentally messing him up bad too. Now, it would get so bad that Donnelly was actually begging Gacy to kill him. Like, just fucking kill me and get it over with. I can't take this anymore, you know. Gacy, he laughed at him and said, I'm getting to it. Yeah. But for whatever reason, Gacy did not kill him. Instead, he drove him to his place of work, removed the handcuffs, and just let him go. Badly beaten, viciously assaulted, but alive. Now, Gacy, he did tell him if he reported the assault that no one was going to believe him. But Donnelly, he reported the attack anyway. The police, they did speak to Gacy on the assault, and Gacy told them, yeah, we had sex. It's slave sex. Gets kind of rough. And the police fucking believed him. No charges were filed. And again, I say, what the fuck is wrong with these police officers? Yeah. I guess if you're going to be a real fuck up, go to Chicago and do it, because they don't do shit over there. That's what I'm saying. Now, Gacy, he is still free to do what he does. And on February 16th of 78, William Kindred goes missing. Now, he told his fiancée that he was going to the bar and that he was never seen again. March 78, Gacy picks up Jeffrey Rignall. Now, Gacy lured him into the car to smoke some weed. And as soon as Jeff gets in the car, he is met with a chloroform rag to the face and knocked out. Okay. Now, he was taken to the Summerdale house and, like Donnelly, tortured and violently assaulted, repeatedly horrific things done to him, hours after hour after hour. And Rignall, he could see that there was someone else in the house. Yeah. Now, he was being chloroformed a lot, all on that drive and there at the house, too. And one of the occasions that he came out of this chloroform nightmare, there was a blonde man with his hair parted in the middle performing oral sex on him. Well, folks, that would not be Gacy, okay? That was somebody else. And then the next time he's comes to, like, there's lights being turned on and off in different parts of the house. So he insisted that there was another person in the house, right? The kids gave him a blowjob at some point, and he wasn't, like, doing the torturing kind of thing, but Rignall wasn't asking for all this other shit either, okay? So he is being assaulted by this guy, but not attacked like Gacy was doing. Now, the kid would also not try to help Rignall. Never tried to, like, help free him or stop Gacy from doing what Gacy was doing. And so again, you know, it's suggesting that Gacy had help. I mean, why in the hell would Rignall have such a description of blonde hair parted down the middle? Like, what? Why would he do that? Well, Gacy doesn't kill Rignall. He takes Rignall to Lincoln Park and let him go alive. And I kind of think that maybe Gacy thought that he would die from his injuries because he really put him through it. Who knows? But he left him alive. Now, Rignall, he does report the attack to the police, and they don't take the matter very seriously. No damn surprise there. But Rignall, he wasn't having any of that. Now, he felt that this guy was far too dangerous to be left alone, and so he does his own investigation. Now, he could remember through this chloroform haze when he'd come to on the ride, he's trying to, like, make a mental note of where the hell he is, okay? And he remembers a specific exit. So, he stakes out that exit for months 4 months to be exactly, as in 4 months. Yeah. And so he finally sees Gacy's car, so he follows him to the house. He gets the address and he gets the plate number and he takes it back to the police. So he's absolutely doing the cops' jobs for them, this guy. Thank God. Anyway, he filed charges against Gacy, and the police, they go and they arrest Gacy and they charge him for battery, a misdemeanor. Like, why the hell it wasn't kidnapping and torture and all this other shit, who the hell knows? But at least they were bringing him in on something, right? Yeah. Well, don't get too excited, people, because Gacy was charged and released. That was July 15th, 1978. And since he was released, he just went on to kill until his capture in December of 78. So Timothy O'Rourke, 20 years old, vanished. Frank Landolin, 19 years old, gone. 20-year-old James Mazzara disappeared. Earlier in December of 78, though, Gacy would make the biggest mistake of his killing career. It was December 11th, 1978. A young boy by the name of Rob Peast would disappear from the drugstore parking lot that he worked at with his mother waiting for him. Yeah. Now, she was there to pick up her son so that they could celebrate her birthday that evening. Rob, he was just finishing up with his shift, and he asked his mom, "Can you just wait a few minutes, Mom? This contractor guy wants to talk to me about a summer job." So she waits, and she waits, and she waits, but still no Rob. She asked the other employees if they had seen him, and they said they hadn't. She asked the owner of the drugstore if he had seen Rob, and she tells him that Rob had mentioned something about wanting to talk to a contractor about a job, and now, she can't find Rob. So the owner tells her the name of the contractor is John Gacy, but that he also had not seen Rob. He thought that he had left as well. So Mrs. Peace, she immediately goes home and she tells her husband that Rob has basically disappeared, vanished right out from underneath her, and together they go to the police station and file a missing persons report. Now, the police, they do go to Gacy's house on December 12th, so it's like half a day has passed, and so they show up at Gacy's house, and they tell Gacy that they'd like to speak to him about this young kid, that maybe he was the last one to be seen with this kid. Well, he says he doesn't know the kid and that he never talked to anyone about a job. So the police, they ask him to come to the station and he, give a statement. And Gacy says that he can't right now because there was a death in the family and, he needs to make arrangements for the services. So the police tell him, well, come as soon as possible then. Gacy agrees. Now Gacy, he shows up at the police station around 3:20 in the morning. So we're at 3:20 a.m. on December 13th, okay? And he's covered in mud. Yeah. And he asked the officer there at the desk if Kozenzak is still there. And the reporting officer says, no, we left hours ago. Like, it's the middle of the damn night here. It's 3:20 in the morning. You're going to have to come back in like 4 or 5 hours when everybody's in the office, normal hours. And so Gacy, he leaves. And the reporting officer makes a note of his appearance, him being covered in this mud. Well, Gacy, he does come back to the station on the 13th of December, and by this time, the police had finally ran Gacy's damn name. So, if the records were sealed, then apparently they weren't at this time, because Des Plaines police was able to see it, or his records were never really sealed, and Chicago was lying their asses off about that because they actually never ran his name. Who knows? But regardless, Des Plaines, they run his record, and they finally see that Gacy had done some time in Iowa for sodomy against a young boy. So, Kozenzak, he believes that Gacy may have the Peast boy in his home. So while Gacy is being talked to by the other officers, Kozenzak, he's getting a search warrant for Gacy's house. And there's a big scuffle that takes place there. He doesn't want to hand over his keys, and Kozenzak's like, well, I'll just break the damn door down, or you can give me the keys. So after a long while, Gacy, he ends up handing over the keys to the house, and the house is searched. Now, the search warrant is made to find Rob Peast. Nothing more, nothing less. It simply states, Rob Peast. Now, the police, they enter Gacy's home and they find all sorts of things. They find a class ring with the initials JAS. They find porn, several driver's licenses, a pair of handcuffs, a 2x4 with holes drilled in it. They find drugs, a starter gun, men's clothes that are way too small to be Gacy's. They find sex toys and books titled Pretty Boys Must Die. They also find the entrance to the crawl space. That leads them beneath Gacy's home. Now they enter the crawl space. Let me repeat that. They enter the crawl space. They don't just poke their heads down there. They physically go into the crawl space and crawl around down there looking for Rob. When they exited the crawl space, they tracked the dirt and the white powder from the lime all through Gacy's house. Lieutenant Kozenzak goes into the kitchen, and there in the trash can he sees a photo receipt for film processing. It is the only piece of evidence that Lieutenant Kozenzak will collect for the investigation. Now, while the other officers are busy collecting all the other evidence mentioned, Kozenzak gets this one piece. Now, back at the station, Gacy, he's still talking to the other officers and holding fast to his story that, he did not talk to Rob and he didn't offer Rob, or anyone else for that matter, a job. They asked why he was at the pharmacy twice on December 11th, and he told them that he had gone in to take some measurements for a possible remodeling job, and the second time was to retrieve his appointment book. He had left it, and that the owner, Phil Torf, had called him and told him that he had left it. Well, the officers, they had already talked to Phil, and Phil hadn't said that he called him. They're like, no, he came in to pick up his appointment book. Not that I called him to come get his appointment book. So the police, they know that he's lying because they've already talked to Phil about this. But regardless, the other officers, they're finishing their search and they come up with absolutely nothing pertaining to Rob or his disappearance. So they leave. They return to the station and they give Gacy his keys back. Now Gacy, he goes home. And David Cram, he was actually there when the Gacy house was being searched. And he was still there when Gacy himself returned home. Now Gacy's asking Cram, what were they looking for? What were they taking? What's going on? And then he notices the dirt and the lime powder on the floor. He asked Cram if they were in the crawl space, and Cram says yes. In a panic, Gacy grabs a flashlight and he heads to the crawl space. He opens the hatch, goes inside, shines the flashlight throughout the entire space. No digging. Gacy's relieved. Now, Lieutenant Kozenzak, he just knows that Gacy is his man for this, right? So he puts a 24-hour surveillance on Gacy. 2 teams of 2 are going to take 12-hour shifts each, and wherever Gacy goes, they are to go too. So that's going on. Now, it got to the point that Gacy would invite them to eat with him. They would buy one another drinks, sit and chat, get to know each other. And Gacy would even invite them into his home on occasion. It was a really record cold December in Chicago that year of 78. Brutal, crazy weather. December's not good there anyway, but this particular December, it was something for the record books, okay? So he would invite them to come in and get a cup of coffee, warm up for a minute, use the restroom if they needed to, that sort of thing. And occasionally he would invite them in for a meal. The balls on this dude. So they got to know him pretty well. And they would have to remind each other that, Gacy was dangerous. But Gacy, he was always very calm and well-liked. Everywhere they went, they'd walk into a building and they'd be, hey, John, how you doing, John? Oh, my gosh, it's so good to see you, John. What have you been up to? I mean, everybody loved John Gacy. And so these officers, they really did have to remind themselves that this dude's bad and we really need to find this kid. Okay. Well, the following day after the search warrant thing there, the investigators got a call from Mike Rossi. Now, Rossi, he informed the investigators of Gregory Godzik's disappearance and the fact that another PDM employee, Charles Hatula, had been found earlier drowned in the Illinois River. Now, maybe this Charles person was one of the 5 that Gacy had claimed he threw in the river. I mean, we're obviously not going to ever know now, but it is kind of strange that Mike would bring that up, especially since Charles's name had never been brought up before. So maybe there was 34 and not just 33. On December 15th of 78, the Des Plaines police would look further into the complaint from Jeff Rignall. Remember, he's the one that did his own damn investigation, that guy. So they wanted to talk to him about the charges that he had filed against Gacy. Now, on the same day, Gacy's former wife, Carol, she was also interviewed, and she informed the officers of John Bukovich's disappearance. So, I mean, people are talking about these employees just disappearing, okay? And on that same day that Carol is speaking to the officers were actually able to trace that class ring that they had found on the search warrant back to John Allen Zick. So the officers, they go to the Zick family home and they talk to the family about the disappearance of their son in January of 77. Now, Zick's mom, she would tell them that there were several of his items missing from his apartment, okay? And among them was a Motorola TV. She would also tell them that John's car was, spotted still in that gas, and that they traced it back to Gacy. And that when traced back to Gacy, he told the officers that John had sold him the car and all this, and that it was, Mike Rossi then bought it from Gacy, and he's the one that stole the gas. That's what's happening with the Zick family. Okay. So on December 17th, the officers, they're going to speak to Mike again about the car, and of course his story doesn't change. It stays the same because, he's like, that's what happened. Gacy purchased the car from John, and then Gacy sold it to me. So his story stays the same. Now, while on surveillance, Gacy, again, he would oftentimes invite the police to eat with him or grab that drink at the bar, still insisting that he had nothing to do with the Peace Boys' disappearance. And they would engage in conversation with Gacy, who loved to talk all about his damn self and all of his great accomplishments and, brag. That's what he does. And on one occasion, he told the officers that he did work with the Jolly Joker Clown Club. Oh, yes. And he told them all about his charity work and parties as Pogo the Clown. And on one occasion, he told the police that he was sharing a meal with, quote, clowns can get away with murder, end quote. I mean, the balls on this dude. For real, though. What the hell? Now, by December 18th, the round-the-clock watching his every move was really starting to get to Gacy, right? He is not having fun anymore. So he goes to his attorney's office to prepare a $750,000 lawsuit against the department, demanding that they cease their 24-hour surveillance, claiming that it is hurting his business. And it probably was, but what the hell? We've got a missing kid, dude. Well, with this pending suit, the officers know that they need to make a move, and they need to make it damn soon. On December 19th, the investigators, they begin compiling evidence to get a second search warrant. That same day, Gacy's attorneys files the civil suit against the department, and the hearing for the lawsuit was scheduled for December 22nd, 1978, just days away. So Gacy, he's so confident that on the 19th of December, he would invite the 2 officers tailing him to come into his house. Now, they leapt at the chance, right? So the plan was that one would talk to Gacy and keep him busy while the other excused himself to use the bathroom. Yes, the old bathroom trick. Well, the officer using the bathroom, he did see a small TV in Gacy's room that matched the description given by Mrs. Zick. But he couldn't get the numbers off of it. So he slips into the bathroom to flush the toilet and wash his hands, make the whole bathroom excuse look good. And as the officer flushed the toilet, the heat kicked on. And the smell of decay, the smell of decay, the smell of death, hits him in the face. Now, when they go off their shift, they report this decay smell, 40 hours after. 40 hours after. What the actual fuck? So you're telling me that they smelled damn death in the bathroom and didn't report that shit for 40 hours? Good hell. Well, they report it with the hopes that it would be enough to get the second warrant. 40 hours. What the hell? So while they're waiting for that warrant to come, they re-interview David Cram and Mike Rossi on December 20th. Rossi agreed to be interviewed about John Zick as well as Rob Peast. Now, when questioned by the detective and asked where he thought that the body of Rob was, Rossi stated, quote, "In the crawl space. He could have put him in the crawl space," end quote. Holy shit. Yeah. Now, he would also be given a polygraph test to which the results were inconclusive. However, it was noted that when asked questions about where Rob Peast's body was, that his blood pressure went through the damn roof. He then stopped the test. He would kind of continue to talk to the officers like he wasn't super duper good at helping, but he wasn't completely like, no, I'm not going to help either. But he absolutely would not do another polygraph. Now, while speaking to Cram and Rossi, Gacy would have him dig trenches in the crawl space and to not deviate from where they were instructed to dig. He said the trenches were 2 feet deep by 2 feet wide by 6 feet long. The size of graves. Now, he also said that Gacy would have him spread lime down there. Now, David Cram, he would tell investigators about the attempted assault by Gacy in 1976. Now, he also told them that after the December 13th search warrant of Gacy's house, Gacy had, quote, turned pale, end quote, when he saw the mud and lime on the floor. That he immediately grabbed a flashlight and looked in the crawl space for any signs of digging. Now, when the investigators asked Cram if he had ever been in the crawl space, Cram replied that he had. He had been asked by Gacy to spread lime down there and also to dig trenches for a plumbing project. Now, Cram would tell them, the size of the trenches were 2 by 2 by 6, just like Rossi had said. So on December 20th, Gacy, he drives to his attorney Sam Amirati's office to attend a scheduled meeting and to talk to him about this upcoming civil suit. Now, Amirati said that Gacy looked, quote, disheveled, end quote. And Gacy, he immediately asked for a drink. So he pours Gacy a drink. Gacy slams it down and another is poured. He then points at the front page of the newspaper on Amirati's desk and he says, quote, "This boy is dead. He's in the river," end quote. Holy shit. Now, over the next several hours, he gives a, quote, rambling confession, end quote, that ran into the early morning hours. He would say, quote, "I was judge, jury, and executioner of many people, most of whom were buried in my crawl space," end quote. Jesus. Yeah, others he would throw in the Des Plaines River off the I-55 bridge. He would refer to the boys as, quote, male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars, end quote, that he had to give the rope trick to. He would also say that he would just, quote, wake up, and there would be a dead, strangled boy on the floor with handcuffs behind his back, end quote. When he spoke of Rob, he said, quote, "I placed a tourniquet around his neck. He was crying and scared," end quote. Gacy would then pass out from the liquor he had drank. When Gacy woke, his attorney said to him, quote, "You confessed to killing 33 people, end quote. And Gacy would say, quote, "Well, I can't think about that shit right now. I've got things to do," end quote. And he left. Now, Gacy drove to a Shell station, and while there, he handed off a bag of weed to Lance Jacobson, an attendant that worked at the Shell station. Now, Lance, he didn't want anything to do with that shit. He could see that the cops were tailing this dude, so he quickly handed that weed right the hell over and said, "Look, Gacy just gave me this shit, and I don't want it." Now, Gacy, he's acting pretty crazy. Crazier than normal, okay? And it's to the point where he's driving like a complete moron, and he's almost to lose the officers following him. And so, there's a couple times they had to pull him over and yank him out of the car and tell him to knock it off, driving like 55 through a school zone and shit. So he was acting nuttier than usual. Now, Gacy, he went to see a few people. It's almost like he kind of knew that maybe the end was near or something. Maybe he's saying his goodbyes. And after he spoke with Cram and Rossi, Gacy would have Cram drive him to his attorney's office, and there he spoke with his other attorney, Leroy Stevens. Now, as he was speaking with him, Cram took the opportunity to talk to the officers, and he told them that Gacy had told him and Rossi the night before that he had confessed to these murders with his attorney, and that he had killed 30-some people. This is what Cram says. Now, when Gacy was done with his attorneys, he asked Cram to drive him to the cemetery where his father was buried. And now the officers are starting to think that maybe Gacy is going to commit suicide. So the officers decide to take him in on the possession and distribution of the marijuana that he gave to the gas attendant. I mean, pretty much anything to get him in custody at this point, right? They just need him off the street and alive. So all that day, Gacy, he's popping pills and smoking weed, and it really is a damn miracle that he didn't overdose from the Valium that he had taken, because he'd taken a lot. And, yeah. So, while they have him in custody, the Des Plaines police, they're working on getting that second search warrant still, and Gacy, he tells them that he's having a heart attack. So the police, they take him to the hospital, and they tell the hospital people there to run as many damn tests as they want. Like, keep him as long as you want and as long as possible, because they need this time to get that second search warrant. And they need it before the sun comes up, because that civil suit is scheduled to happen, and it's just hours away now, okay? So while he's being seen by the hospital, they run a whole bunch of blood work and a ton of tests on this guy, and they find that nothing is wrong with him medically other than he has a whole host of drugs in his system. Yeah. So they release him back to the police. Well, this little distraction did give the police enough time to get that second search warrant based on the photo receipt and the smell of death. Yeah, the one that took 40 damn hours to report. That smell. So at 4:30 on December 21st, 1978, the eve of the civil suit hearing, the second warrant is granted. Now, armed with the search warrant, police and evidence technicians, they drive to Gacy's house, and when they enter, they notice that Gacy had unplugged the sump pump, which made the crawl space flood. So they plug the pump in, and they wait for that crawl space to drain out, and when it does, they begin entry. And an evidence technician named Daniel Gentry, he entered the crawl space, crawled to the southwest corner, and began digging. Now, within minutes, he had uncovered putrefied flesh and a human arm bone. He immediately shouted to the investigators above, quote, "You can charge him with murder. I think this whole place is full of kids," end quote. Now, when asked if it was the pieced boy, the tech said no. The body had been here for a while. And the reason they wanted to know if the body found was pieced was because the warrant, again, was specific only to Rob Piest. Much like the first warrant was specific only to Rob Piest. Now, after Gacy had been informed that they had found bodies in the crawl space, he says that he wants to, quote, "clear the air," end quote. And in the early morning hours of December 22nd, 1978, Gacy confessed that since 1972 he had committed 25 to 30 murders. He would tell them that he would lure them to the car that was fitted to look like a police car, and he had a badge and a gun and all that. Other times, he would lure them to the house on the false pretense of giving them a job, or he would simply earn their trust. Once they would be in the house, he would show them the handcuff trick. He would do the trick for them with his hands handcuffed behind his own back, and he would free himself with the key that he either had in his pocket or cupped in his hand. Now the boys, they would want to try the trick, and they would put the cuffs on themselves. Gacy said they would try for several minutes to free themselves and finally ask, "What's the trick?" And Gacy would answer, "You have to have the key." He would go on to say that this is when they would start to panic. He would muffle the sounds of their screams by shoving their underwear in their mouths, down their throats so far that several died not from strangulation but from suffocation. He would also tell the investigators that on many occasions he would drown the boys just to bring them back to life, to torture them further. prolonging their imminent death. Others would meet what he called the rope trick, to which he would take a rope, tie it around their neck, put a second loop in, and use a stick or hammer handle to put between the two knots. He would then give it a little twist. Some of the victims were found with these tourniquets still around their necks. When he was asked about Rob Peast, Gacy said that Rob came up to the car at the pharmacy asking about work. He told Rob to get in. Rob told him, "Well, my mom's waiting for me in the parking lot." And Gacy said, "It's fine. I just live up the road. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Rob got in. When they got to the house, he did the handcuff trick after telling Rob all about his clowning and tricks that he did as pogo. And he showed Rob the handcuff trick. He said that Rob was crying and scared. He did the rope trick and the phone rang. With the tourniquet around Rob's neck, Gacy left the room to take the call. When he returned, Rob was on the floor, dead. Now, he did admit to sleeping next to Rob's body before dumping him in the river off the I-55 bridge. He would also tell them that when he came to the police station that day covered in mud, that was when he had discarded the body and slid off the road needing assistance to get out of the ditch that he went into. If it had happened the other way, when he was dumping Peast, he would have been caught with the body. Yeah. He also let the police know that when they were there on his house at the 12th, that he had Rob's body in the attic. Eventually drew a map of the crawl space indicating where the bodies were. Later, Gacy would withdraw his confession or change the details or both. He would say that he didn't commit any of the murders, that he only did one or two. And an important side note about this confession is that it was not recorded by any officer at any time, and he gave many of them. And Gacy also never signed a confession, so legally, no confession was ever given. Something to chew on. Now, on February 6, 1980, Gacy's trial would begin, and he was charged with 33 murders. He was tried at Cook County, Illinois, before Judge Garappo. Now, Gacy, he spent 300 hours in the year before trial with doctors at the Maynard Correctional Facility. He underwent a variety of testing to see if he was competent to stand trial. And during this time, of course, he's trying to convince these doctors that he suffers from multiple personality disorder. Now, his lawyers, they would have him plead not guilty by reason of insanity. And the prosecution, they presented that Gacy was sane and fully in control of his actions, and the measures that he went through to conceal his crimes, basically spells that out. The dude's not crazy, right? Well, several employees of PDM, they would testify that Gacy had them digging in the crawl space, and two of those that testified were Cram and Rossi. Now, Gacy had told police that he only dug 5 of the graves himself. All the other graves were dug by his employees, including Greg Godzik, John Bukovich. These boys, they dug their own graves. Can you imagine sitting in that courtroom as a parent listening to this shit? Oh my God. I would be the one doing a damn life sentence because I would kill this guy. Holy shit. Others to testify were Anthony. Remember, he's the boy that got out of the handcuffs and put them on Gacy? Yeah, him. Jeff Rignall, the young man that was left beaten but alive at Lincoln Park, and Robert Donnelly, the other young man that was also left alive, forced to play Russian roulette and all that, the slave sex one, yeah, him. And full circle, Don Voorhees, the young boy that had Gacy imprisoned years earlier. Now, Voorhees had a very difficult time testifying about his ordeal of assault and torture that this poor kid went through it so bad that he almost couldn't speak on this matter. And I don't blame him. But he was eventually excused from the stand because he couldn't do it. Now, when Jeff testified, he went into detail recounting the abuse and torture that he had endured at the hands of Gacy in March of '78. He cried the entire time, but he did give a full statement to the facts, and he said that he was, quote, beastly and animalistically attacked, end quote. Upon specific cross-examination, relating to the torture and torment that he had endured, Jeff vomited, and he was then excused from further testimony. Jesus. When Robert Donnelly took the stand, he too was visibly distressed, and he recalled his attack at Gacy's hands, and he would break down several times on the stand as he testified. And Gacy, he'd laugh at him, just laugh at him through the whole thing. Donnelly, though, he would finish his testimony and never wavered, even when the cross-examination was trying to discredit his testimony. He held fast. Good for him. Now, on March 11th, closing arguments, they would begin. And Terry Sullivan, the prosecuting attorney, he would begin outlining Gacy's history of abusing young boys, the testimony of the efforts to avoid detection, and he described Gacy's surviving victims, Donnelly and Voorhees, as, quote, living dead, end quote. He would refer to Gacy as, quote, worst of all murderers, end quote. He would also say, quote, John Gacy has accounted for more human devastation than many earthly catastrophes, but one must tremble when thinking about how close he came to getting away with it, end quote. Jesus. Now, Gacy's attorney, Sam Amirati, he would say to ignore the testimony given by the doctors for the state, and accused Attorney Sullivan of scarcely referring to the evidence presented during the trial in closing arguments to cause hatred for his client, Mr. Gacy. He would try to portray Gacy as a, quote, man driven by compulsion he was unable to control, end quote. Now, on the morning of March 12th, William Kunkel, he continued to argue for the prosecution. Now, Kunkel referred to a testimony of a doctor who had examined Gacy back in '68. And this doctor had diagnosed Gacy as an antisocial personality capable of committing crimes without remorse. He stated that if the recommendations had been followed by that particular doctor, that Gacy wouldn't have been freed. And at the close of the arguments, Kunkel, he pulled the photos of the 22 identified victims from the board that had been displayed in the courtroom, and he asked the jury not to show sympathy, but to show justice. He then said, quote, show the same sympathy this man showed when he took their lives and put them there, end quote. And he threw the photos in the crawl space that had been removed from Gacy's home and physically brought into the courtroom. So they had 25 of these victims identified and on a board there in the courtroom. And so when Kunkel took those 22 identified photos from the board, he walked over to the actual crawl space that had been crawled through 27 times and threw the pictures into the crawl space, and they just kind of scattered all on the floor there. And it was said that you could hear like a pin drop, and I imagine that to be very true. It was probably a real wow moment for sure. Pretty damn good visual. Now, the jury, they deliberated for less than 2 hours and found Gacy guilty of all 33 murders. He was also found guilty of the other sexual assaults. The jury would deliberate for just another 2 hours and come back with the death penalty. An initial date of execution was set for June 2nd, 1980. Now, he would remain on death row, though, for 14 years, and during this time, he would begin to paint, and he would sell his artwork. Now, these paintings, they would sell from $200 to $20,000 each. Now, he said that he painted and sold his art to bring joy into people's lives. And I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I would like to have a piece of his art today, not because it would bring me joy or because I like the guy, but because I have been writing to serial killers for quite a few years now, and I have collected some pretty crazy art from them along the way. And I think I just would like to have it for my own personal macabre collection, I guess. Anyway, he would often paint himself as Pogo. He had many appeals, but his conviction was always upheld. Thank God for that. He would, however, get his execution date pushed back with each appeal, right? So he knew he wasn't going to get out. Well, he thought he might because he was just that damn arrogant. But in the end, he didn't. But he definitely knew that by appealing, the execution date would inevitably be delayed each time, until, of course, you run out of appeals. So his final appeal was denied in October of 93, and his true execution date would be May 10th of 1994. So on the morning of May 9th, 94, Gacy, he was transferred by helicopter to Stateville Correctional Center to be executed. The facility that he was at did not do executions there, so they put him on a helicopter and flew him to Statesville Correctional. Now that afternoon, he was able to have a private picnic with his family, and for his last meal, of course, he had KFC. You guessed that, right? He had KFC, a dozen fried shrimp, French fries, fresh fruit, and a Diet Coke. Now that evening, he had prayer with a Catholic priest before being taken to the execution chamber. Now, in one of the last interviews he gave, he said that he, quote, "I got to kill 33 times. You only get to kill me once." And then he laughs and says Gacy wins again, end quote. Like, what the fuck? This guy, he never once showed any kind of remorse, ever. He really didn't care about the devastation that he caused these families. Just an ass. Now, before the execution would begin, the chemicals used for lethal injection, they would solidify, causing problems with the injection. So they would have to correct that. That execution team comes in and they replace the tubing and the injection starts again. The entire process took about 18 minutes. He was pronounced dead at 12:56 a.m. on May 10th, 1994. Now the killer clown is dead. It was reported that his last words were, quote, "kiss my ass," end quote, but many of those officers present that had done the surveillance and all that shit that they did for that 10 days, they were present and they all said that they did not hear that, and that they thought that maybe someone had given that to the press just, for some kind of ratings or whatever. But what we do know for sure is that shortly after his death, his brain was removed and studied in attempts to kind of figure out, like, what makes a person do these kind of things, right? Well, to date, we are no closer to the answer to that. I mean, his brain's not going to talk in a damn jar, and it didn't show any significant damage, so there's that. And the rest of him was then cremated. So that, my friends, is the John Wayne Gacy story and how he was caught and captured and all that hoopty-la that we've been force-fed. And that's what I'm going to refer it to. We have been force-fed that story. Yeah. So, let's get into it. Remember when I was saying to, pay attention to this and to pay attention to that? So, yeah, we're gonna cover that now. So there was always one thing with the Gacy story that bothered me from day one, from just learning about him. And that was that first search warrant. Those officers, and I mean several of them, they went into the crawl space. Remember I said they didn't just poke their heads down in there. No, they crawled across the entire crawl space looking for Rob. And we now know that when they were down in there, they were crawling on top of 27 bodies. 27. And not one of them smelled death. It's that scent that you cannot mistake for anything else. And thank God I've never smelled it, because I imagine that that's very true. But, yeah, they're crawling on top of 27 bodies, and not one of them smelled death. Okay? Not one. But later, the smell of death was caught by an officer in the bathroom of Gacy's home when the damn heater kicked on. Now, Rob's body wasn't in the crawl space, so it couldn't be death. I mean, ask yourselves this. If they couldn't smell death when they were physically on top of those 27 bodies in the crawl space, how could one possibly smell death from the bathroom? They made that second warrant 100% to finding Rob's body. They were absolutely certain that Rob was in that crawl space and that now, sometime later, his body would be decomposing and therefore smell. But we know that he wasn't in the crawl space, though, So that means that that officer would have had to lie about that smell. We also know that according to police reports that that officer did not report that smell for 40 hours. Remember my little meltdown about the 40 hours thing? Yeah. So what the hell? Lies. Lies. Now the other piece of evidence, and I use that word lightly with this, was collected on the first warrant as well, and that's that photo receipt. Now that photo receipt is not on any evidence technician's report, nor is it in any photos taken at the house, which included the trash can in the kitchen that Kozenczak said he pulled it from. Now, when you're looking at the photo of the receipt there, what you're looking at is just the top portion. Okay, you can see where it's like separated from the larger part. That's what they supposedly found in the trash can. Okay, and back in the day, you would tear off that part, keep that part, put your film in the rest of the envelope, and it would be off to be processed. So again, let me ask you, if that receipt was in the trash and collected on December 13th, as Kozenczak said that it was, why in God's name did it take them 6 days? That's right, people. 6 days to see who the receipt belonged to. Now, the receipt is clearly marked Nissan Pharmacy on the top. It's the very place that Rob disappeared from, and it took them 6 damn days to cross-reference it with the pharmacy. No way. I'm definitely not buying that story anymore, and I certainly hope that you don't either. Now, I have combed through the entire evidence collection sheets, and there are many, and that receipt was never in that house. That's why it wasn't cataloged. That's why it's not on an evidence technician's report, and that is why it was not photographed at the time of supposed collection. Yeah. Now again, they made that second search warrant very specific to Rob Piest. And again, even though they had pulled bodies out of that home, they did not have Rob, meaning that they could have pulled out 100 bodies and it wouldn't have mattered because they didn't have Rob. And Rob was the only person they were looking for and the only thing on that search warrant. They boxed themselves in. Yep. So now they had to find a way to put Rob in that house. Because without Rob's body, they had no case. So what I'm saying is that Kozenczak 100% planted that receipt to get back in that house and prove that Rob was in there. Because getting that second search warrant was going to be extremely difficult, if not impossible, since they didn't produce anything on Rob with the first warrant. So they had to come up with something. So they and real quick, right? Because that civil suit was leaning over their heads. So that would have made them have to stop all surveillance and so on and so forth. I mean, it was a shit show and a half is what it was. So to get that second search warrant, it's the smell of death and the bullshit photo receipt puts Rob in the house. Now, Kim, she actually did 3 statements. Yep, 3. We're only told about one, and that's what every story you ever hear about Gacy is revolved around, is that statement, the photo receipt statement. But there were 2 more done prior to that, and we're going to take a look at those. So the first one and the second one, I do believe that Kim was 100% accurate, and she gave some great statements, a lot of detail in them. So the first one was given on 12/12 of 78 at 9:42 a.m. So we are probably half a day, almost on the dot of when Rob was missing. Okay, he disappeared December 11th around 9 p.m. and now we are 12/12 at 9:42 a.m. So pretty much 12 hours on the dot, okay, when she gave the first report. And it reads, this is the reporting officer and how he wrote up her statement. And it says, I contacted Kim Byers and I was advised that Rob Peast had left the store at approximately 9 p.m. And prior to leaving, he made a statement to the effect that a contractor guy wants to talk to me. Upon questioning the buyer youth further, she stated that he had left some of his personal belongings in the store, and she had described the youth as kind of spacey at times, and indicated that on occasion he had a tendency to forget things. Kim Byers indicated that she did not observe the missing youth talking to John Gacy, and she did not observe the two together in the pharmacy. So I believe that that's true and correct. So let's take a look at the second one. Now we are still on 12/12, so the day after that Rob went missing, and now we are at 1:57 p.m., so a little over 4 hours from the last statement that we just read, okay? And again, this is the reporting officer, and it reads, Miss Byers stated that she doesn't remember John Gacy leaving the store, although he had been in making some measurements and was rearranging items. She further advised this officer that in her opinion, Rob has no reason to leave home. Upon questioning the Byers youth further, she indicated that Rob had left the store between 9 p.m. and 9:02 p.m. She is relatively certain of the time as he had called her to the front of the store stating, quote, come watch the register, end quote. At which time she asked, where are you going? And he stated, quote, the contractor guy wants to talk to me. I'll be right back, end quote. Byers stated that during the time Rob made that statement, Mrs. Peast, Rob's mother, was in the store. She further advised that Rob had been in and out of the store a few times to take out the garbage, and at least on one occasion he had entered the store through the back door. She believes that he took the garbage out at approximately 8 p.m. As during that time, he was struck by snowballs which were allegedly thrown by little kids. Upon further questioning her about other statements which she allegedly made, specifically the statement regarding, quote, a big boy, end quote, she advised this officer that she had made a statement to the effect that Rob was a big boy and he could take care of himself, and although she is not certain, that statement may have been directed to Phil Torf. Remember, he's our pharmacy owner. Now, Miss Byers stated that she doubts that the individuals at the liquor store could be of any assistance because Rob did not enter that establishment to purchase any soda on 12/11 of 78. Miss Byers was advised to contact this officer in the event that she should develop any information that would indicate the whereabouts of the missing youth. So again, great statement, lot of detail, 9 to 9:02, 8 p.m., got struck with snowballs, didn't go to the liquor store establishment to purchase soda. Yeah. Good statement. Very detailed. The girl is observant, okay? She is paying attention. Now, this third statement that she gives, this is the one that every Gacy story is based on, this statement. But this statement came after the police contacted her requesting receipt number 36119. Now, here is how that call was placed to the buyer's residence regarding the receipt. This is 12/19/78 at 6 p.m. I contacted Mrs. Byers to determine if her daughter Kimberly was at home. I was then advised that Kimberly was at a swim meet at Maine North High School, but was expected home at approximately 8 p.m. I then requested that Miss Byers contact this department in reference to Kim providing us with a statement regarding photo receipt number 36119. Oh yes, it's getting a little juicy now. So the third and final statement from Kim was taken on 12/19 of 78, and this is how it reads, word for word. You're going to love this. On the night of December 11th, 1978, I worked from about 5:20 to 10 p.m. I brought in with me an envelope with pictures and negatives from Homecoming 1978. My sister wanted copies of some of these pictures. I decided it would make a nice Christmas present. They were pictures of me and my boyfriend, so I would have them done soon. So about 7:30, the store was kind of quiet. It would be a good time to put my order in for the pictures. I went to my bag and got the envelope out. I walked over to the counter, took an envelope, and began to fill it out. The order I wanted was confusing. 1 of number 3 plus 1, and 5 by 7 of number 3. Normally, you put the order in different envelopes, but I couldn't cut the negative. Anyhow, I ended up throwing out 2 envelopes because of explanatory mistakes. I finally was satisfied with the way I wrote it up, 36119. Then recorded it into the logbook, took the tab off, and put the envelope into the bag on the side of the counter. I stood there for a second, dumbfounded, not knowing what to do with the stub. I would normally either throw it away or put it on a hook behind the counter, but these pictures, they meant a lot to me, and for some reason I thought I shouldn't throw it out. I started to stick it on the hook. I hesitated, then stuck it in Rob's pocket of his jacket. I was wearing his jacket because I had a short-sleeved shirt on and it was very cold. I really don't know why I did. Maybe I meant it as a joke, or maybe just to put some responsibility on him not to lose my ticket. I think the most probable reason I put it in his pocket was that I intended him to find it, ask me about it, and it would remind me to take it home. Anyway, I had second thoughts about putting it in his pocket, thinking he would say something like, "Kim, why did you put this in my pocket for?" But for some reason, I decided to leave it there. A while later, Rob came to the front and asked for his jacket to take the garbage out. I gave it to him. Then the next time I saw the jacket off of him was when he was working the front. It was on top of the case of cigarettes. Then, of course, when he left, he grabbed it and walked out. What the fuck? Okay. So, what? Yeah. So those other 2 statements, not once does she mention that she borrowed Rob's jacket, much less that she stuck a damn receipt in it. All these details and times for everything else, and she failed to mention that? Bullshit. 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 She likely walked that receipt through the front door of the station there. That is my personal opinion on it. And I'm saying that because they knew that they didn't have Gacy. They knew that. They had to put Rob in that house. That way, whether they had his body or not, they could prove that he was in the house. You following me? So my opinion is that she walked that receipt through the station door and the police told her exactly what to write, including that I borrowed his jacket nonsense and stuck it in his fucking pocket. Ugh. Yeah. They didn't have Gacy. They knew it. They knew they didn't have Gacy. And they probably told Kim, like, we need your help. We're not going to get this guy without your help. It's probably the stress that they put on this teenage girl at the time. And of course she wants to help. Rob was her friend, so she's going to do whatever she can to help. Unbelievable. Now, I do believe that she dropped film off that day. But I do not in any way, shape, or form believe that she ever wore Rob's jacket, much less stuck that receipt in there. I think that's all fabricated nonsense. Yeah. But here we are all these years later, and she still doesn't really want to answer any questions about the crime. And that's fine. Like, she doesn't have to. It's her prerogative not to, and she doesn't have to. But it is a little suspicious. And whenever she speaks on the crimes, it's very brief, and of course, no questions are asked. Again, suspicious. Not to mention that a couple of those officers that were following Gacy have spoke to the fact that that receipt was not in the house. Oh, yes. And one of those officers even said something to the effect of, "I'm not sure why we're still lying about this. It's not like the guy can be resurrected." Aha. Yeah, ain't that some shit? Anyway, now in no way am I saying that Gacy was innocent. Of course he wasn't. He needed to be caught. He needed to be stopped. He needed to be dealt with. Okay, I 100% agree with that. But what I'm saying is there is a right way and a wrong way to do these things. Now, Kozenczak, he had a hunch that it was Gacy, and to his credit, he was right this time. But he had no idea that they were going to find bodies, okay? He thought he was going to find Rob, the only person he was looking for. So when multiple bodies are being recovered and still no Rob, they knew they were probably in a shitstorm panic is what they were, because without his body, they'd have to let Gacy go. Yeah. Now, thank God that Gacy, he was caught, but he was only caught because of the planted evidence. And because of that, every single case that Kozenczak ever worked that resulted in someone being locked up and imprisoned absolutely needs to be reopened and looked at again, because his hunch on cases couldn't possibly be right every time, right? So there could be innocent people in prison. Now, that's crazy. And again, I'm not in any way saying that Gacy should have been treated any differently than he was. I mean, I'm happy as can be, that he was right about Gacy. But what if he hadn't been? I mean, what if they'd never found Rob's body? Gacy, he would have gone free. And trying to even imagine what the death toll would have been at that point is completely unimaginable. Really unimaginable. Still a right way and a wrong way to do these things. And the way that they did the Gacy case really could have resulted in a mistrial. 100% mistrial. Now, I do believe that certain eyes did see this error, but they were also stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point, right? If they were to speak up on the matter, then Gacy, he'd be free. They knew that this problem with the evidence and the search warrant existed. It had huge holes. But no one was going to speak up on it, because to do that was to almost guarantee that Gacy walked out the front door, right? So, now his attorneys, Bob Motta and Steve Amirati, they did argue about the holes in the evidence, and they argued about it a lot. But the judge, he wasn't having any of it. And again, I mean, for obvious reasons, I get it. Gacy, he would have walked out a free man, and no one on God's green earth at this point in time was going to let that happen. I mean, Gacy, he had slipped through the cracks numerous times before. So many times before. And it damn sure wasn't going to happen this time. At all costs. So, I get it. But the evidence was dirty. That receipt was never in Rob's pocket. It was dirty. Moving forward. Now, for Gacy having help. I mean, it's hard to say with 100% certainty, but we do know on at least one occasion Gacy was not in town. And, yeah. So, there's that. Not in town when this kid comes up missing. Now, Gacy, he had pointed the finger at Cram and Rossi plenty, and they both lived with him. Cram was attacked by Gacy not once but twice, so he knew full well what Gacy was and what he was capable of. And then remember that Jeff Rignall, he insisted that there was another person in there, blonde hair, split in the middle, and woke up and this dude's blowing him. So yeah, I don't think he'd lie about that. Yeah. Unbelievable. Another real intriguing point is that Phil Paskey worked with Gacy for sure in September of '78, because we have pay stubs showing that he did. So who is Phil Paskey, you ask? Well, he was the right-hand man to John David Norman, who was running the largest child sex ring in the United States at the time. Probably still. Largest, I mean, he's dead, not running it now. But damn. Okay. And not only that, another of Gacy's PDM employees was Robin Gatch. And who is he? Well, people, if you're standing, you should probably sit the fuck down for this one, because he was part of the Chicago Ripper crew. That's right. He killed 11 people. Now, I don't know when a quinkadink stops being a damn quinkadink, because to me, none of this shit is sheer coincidence, okay? Now, Gacy no doubt killed several, but there are several different signatures found in that crawl space, too. I mean, you have the underwear in some of their throats. Some are dressed, some aren't. Some have bags over their heads, others don't. Some still have the tourniquet still around the neck. I mean, is it possible that Gacy acted alone? Sure. But it's real hard to ignore that he had another serial killer working for him and the right-hand man of the largest sex trafficking organization working for him. Top that off with the simple fact that Gacy was not in town when at least one of the victims went missing. And an interesting thing there is that when the death row attorney people came forward, I think her name is Karen, and then whatever her partner's name was, they went through all of Gacy's files, and he was a meticulous record keeper running these businesses, tax breaks and all that, meticulous record keeper. And she and her partner came up with something like seven times that Gacy was not present in Chicago when these kids came up missing. So again, you're just kind of like, holy shit. And if that's true, then, a lot of people got away with murder, and these families didn't get 100% justice that they deserve. And I kind of feel like all of that is 100% true, and this is why. If they had pressed it further, like looked for more accomplices, then surely what they had done would be uncovered by someone that would not let it go. And Gacy probably would have been, it would have been a mistrial situation. So I don't think that they dug hard because they knew if anybody else looked hard that their dirty little secret was going to be exposed. So it's very interesting. But anyway, that's the story you didn't know. It's kind of wild. The Gacy case is still open. It is still open. There are 5 still unidentified victims, and they weren't nameless when they met Gacy. They had names and lives, and maybe we can give them their names back. So if you had a loved one that went missing between 72 and 78 in the Chicago area, send in the DNA. I will post that information for you in the description box. Now, I also want to recommend to you a podcast. Now, Gacy's attorneys were Bob Motta Jr. and Sam Amirati, right? Well, Bob Motta Jr. has a podcast. He is also an attorney. I don't know if he's still practicing or not, but regardless, he's a lawyer. And Bob Sr., when he was working with Gacy, he actually recorded things. Imagine that. And so there's these Gacy tapes that are not widely heard. And they're absolutely fascinating. So if for no other reason you want to just hear Gacy tapes that you likely have not heard, I would recommend Defense Diaries podcast for that. But Bob Jr. gives all of the legality, right, all of the specifics to the law in the podcast. So specifically the search warrants, the importance of how they were written up and what that means. And so I would highly recommend checking out Defense Diaries and listening to those 33 or 33 and a half episodes, and listen to the Gacy tapes that you don't know or haven't heard. They're remarkable. It's fascinating. And there is also, if you want to know more about the victims, because I'm sure you noticed that I did not go into a lot of detail about them, just the date, their names and date they went missing. And I specifically did that because as a parent, if I were strolling and I found this and my curiosity got the best of me and I clicked on it, I wouldn't want to hear those details of my child again. Okay? So I did not go into any details. But If you want to know about who they were as people before they met Gacy, because again, these people had lives, right? They may have been kids and they may have been young, but they still had lives and they were still doing things and exploring life and figuring it out. And there is an amazing book, which also Defense Diaries recommends, and that's where I learned about it myself, and so I read it. And it's called Boys Enter the House. And it is absolutely beautifully written. I mean, you get a real look into these kids' lives and who they were and what they were doing, where they were going, what was happening with them. And it's just beautifully written. So I would highly recommend Boys Enter the House for a book to read, and definitely go check out Defense Diaries for some Gacy tapes and to learn some legal schmiegel stuff. Okay. And with that being said, folks, that is the John Wayne Gacy story that you don't know. Now, please leave in the comments, what you think about how Gacy was captured, because I'm sure there's some opinions on it, and I do want to hear them, as well as who you would like to hear about next. And take care of each other out there, man. We live in a real crazy time. People are nuts. They do crazy shit. And don't fool yourself thinking that, we're safe now, because we're not. These people are real. They're out there. The FBI, they say somewhere between 50 and 80 active serial killers are operating in the United States at any given time. That's kind of frightening. And, so keep your head up. Be aware of your surroundings. Take care of yourselves and each other. And please hit that like and subscribe button so you can join me on Tuesdays for another Twisted Tale. Thanks so much for hanging in there with me, guys. I know it was a long one, but you take care now and have a great day. Bye.